Right, the title of the talk tonight is Further. And in 1964, Ken Kesey had just written two blockbuster novels in the year or two before that, called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Sometimes a Great Notion. He had a bus that was painted by a bunch of hippie friends into psychedelic colors, and they all piled on board. So LSD was still legal for another 4 years after that, and they basically toured the country promoting this psychedelic lifestyle. And the name of his bus was Further, right? There was always the next horizon, to go after the next experience, the next sort of moral boundary to cross, the next high, the next whatever. Idea of further in that direction is further outward, right? The next experience, the next high, the next something always looking further to the outside. I find it interesting that two of the early proponents of LSD, Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert, were both psychology professors at Harvard, well-respected, tenured, and they were both kicked out eventually. But what I find interesting is that they, after they got kicked out, they went in separate directions. Timothy Leary went sort of doubled down on the LSD experience and thought more is better. And Richard Alpert took the name Ram Dass and went in a different direction. And this is actually the choice. I mean, it's sort of a drastic example, but it's actually a choice that we all have. I mean, when our current situation, our life, so to speak, is not entirely satisfactory, we can go in the outward direction to, more experiences, more success, more money, more fame, whatever direction we choose. But that's the outward, the hope that something somewhere is going to fulfill me, and it's on the outside, and so I'll pursue it, right? So that's Timothy Leary, more drugs, right? Ram Dass went in the other direction. He was a full participant in the psychedelic era, and but then he recognized that there was also a limitation to what could be recognized in that way, and realized that, we always, no matter how adventurous our experiences are, that we always come back to me, right? Me with all my conditioning and faults and, shortcomings and all of that. So that's what we come back to. And, so rather than trying to solve that on, by rearranging outside circumstances, we can possibly have the courage to look within and see and look more directly at what is causing ourselves and those around us to suffer. So that's a totally different shift of direction. So I just find it interesting, these two, colleagues, well-respected colleagues, chose basically the two options. One was more outward movement. One is reverse course and begin to look inward. This is actually what the Christian word of repentance actually means. It's usually considered, at least in this country, to mean, feeling really ashamed of my behavior and just feeling bad about it. But it doesn't actually mean that. It actually comes from the Greek word, which is metanoia, which means to change one's perspective so radically that it causes a shift in the trajectory of one's life. Not about sin, not about being shamed, none of that. It's just a shift of perspective. So you could say, this is a movement that Ram Dass took, right? A shift of perspective caused him to go in quite a different direction. The title of the talk tonight, Further, we're not talking about outwardly further, the next adventure, etc., but the sense of even on this inward journey that spirituality is about, there is, it's necessary to maintain a certain, let's say, modesty, that even if we recognize a certain level, have a certain spiritual experience, however profound, just to maintain a certain justifiable modesty that maybe there's more to see, right? So it's sort of a caution not to claim full enlightenment, for example. We may see our true nature with great clarity in an abiding sense. That's beautiful, very liberating, right? Is that the end of the story? No. No. It then raises the question, well, how does that move in the world? What does that look like? How does that perspective operate through this conditioned body-mind? That doesn't happen overnight. Even for someone like Ramana, who had, very profound awakening at a very young age. I mean, he spent years in a cave by himself, just, absorbing that recognition, before he was really able to begin relating to people. So there's always a sense of, even when things are seen, there can be a sense of, okay, I've seen it, because it may be so profound that it can feel like I've seen the whole thing. So there are examples of people that have, claimed victory too soon, like George Bush in Iraq, it was like mission accomplished. No, there's more to be seen. And, so it's maintaining a certain modesty, not false modesty. We don't have to pretend that we don't know what we know, but also the recognition that what we're talking about here is the vastness of existence. And it takes some time even to really begin integrating that into our form, because the recognition can happen in a split second, but how that recognition moves through these much denser forms, this material form, this thoroughly conditioned body-mind, that takes a little longer. The body is often much slower to respond to that understanding. So this is why teachings can be confusing sometimes, because all teachings are only true and appropriate for a particular point in the journey, not be useful to the same person at a later date, right? So we can see teachings are just meant for a particular point and not meant to be held on forever, right? So let's take a pretty easy example. So, there's some meditation teachers that talk about mindfulness, and then, the instruction is be the witness, be the witness of whatever you're perceiving. And this is fine, it's useful, but it's not the end of the line. It's a helpful way station. It's like, having the training wheels on the bike. They're useful for a certain period, but at some point you got to take them off. So for a while, the instruction to be the witness, as if there's an internal entity in there being the witness, somewhere fixed inside there that's the one watching all this happen. That can be useful because it sort of concentrates our attention and notices that there's this witness and then there's something being witnessed. That's helpful, right? But then it's at another point, another teacher or at a later date might say there is no witness. There's witnessing, but there actually isn't an entity that we can point to and say, there's the witness, right? So if we hold on to the first teaching too tightly, we might be distressed by the next teaching, or confused, or rejected, being nudged to go further. Right? So it's saying, okay, there's this sense of looking from here, but there's actually not a separate self-entity in there that's doing the looking, right? So this can be shocking, right? Wait a minute, I'm sure there is somewhere in there, but we can only claim that if we've never actually looked for it, like really, really looked for it, and tried to pin it down. I mean, we can see all of its attempts to identify itself, claim ownership, insist that, no, it's me, it's this body-mind. But when we go looking further at it, then all of that gets called into question. Typical examples in Buddhism is they, talking about crossing to the other shore, and the Dharma, the teaching, is the raft that's needed to get from this shore to the other shore. But once you get to the other shore, you don't need to keep carrying the raft, right? The raft was useful, essential, for a certain step, a certain learning. But once that's been sort of really consumed by our understanding, then we don't need to hold on to it. We can be appreciative of it, we can be grateful of it, we can bow down to it, but we don't need to keep carrying it. And that leaves us free to go to the next thing. It's sort of like climbing up the ladder, in order to go to the next rung up, you sort of have to let go of the rung below that. You have to reach up and let go of this hand and reach up further. Once had the opportunity to talk to Adia one-on-one at his retreats. There used to be an opportunity to go up and sit next to him with a microphone and have a dialogue with him, and which was pretty intimidating, if there was 400 people in the room. But there was one time I recall where I'd had, just a week or two before, I'd had this very significant shift where I did recognize awareness as my essential beingness, let's say. And I went up and talked to him, and I described that event and that seeing. But I said, I don't want to feel, ungrateful, but, and I've seen this, but I haven't seen oneness yet. Right? And there's still this thing about death that I'm not totally on board with. And his advice, he immediately said, be grateful and move on, right? Be grateful for what was seen, but don't set up camp there. Be willing to continue the journey. Be grateful and move on. He wasn't saying that what was seen wasn't true or real. He was just saying, basically, further, there's more to be seen. So, and that's actually true at all steps. So another example might be one of the practices in Advaita is the practice of neti-neti, which basically means not this, not that. So this is a way of trying to narrow down our identity by saying, well, what I truly am isn't this, it's not that. So on a gross level, we could say, well, it's not what kind of car I drive, it's not, my profession, my level of wealth, it's not my, good looks, it's not my whatever. That's on a very superficial level, of course. And then, we sort of back down more and more and more that what I truly am is not my beliefs, not my ideas, not my opinions, not my judgments about myself and other people, not all my metaphysical knowledge, so you can see all of that is maybe true to some degree, but it doesn't actually get to the heart of it, doesn't actually define what I am. Right? So this is, in a very real sense, it's dualistic, right? It's saying, in search of who I am, I'm saying who I'm not. So in a sense, it's a very dualistic practice. And the point of it is to sort of work ourselves into a corner where there's nothing to grasp onto, right? The sense of no self. But is that the end of the story? What about all those things that we dismissed, like, I don't know, creation? What about that? Do we just write it off? So as liberating as that sense of transcendence from the sense of being identified with a personal, separate, independent self apart from the rest of the world, a bit estranged from the rest of the world, to transcending that, to being comfortable in this sense of pure awareness without any ground, right? Very liberating, right? Is it the end of the story? No. It's a very, very nice state, and it can be tempting to get caught there. Like, I know what the world is, and it's sort of a messy place, so, hanging out in this transcendent state is pretty nice. I'm not sure I want to go back there. Right? But then eventually the question comes up, yeah, but is that all there is? Right? We might even dare to ask ourselves, well, if I'm so free, am I free enough to go back and re-engage in the world as a human? Right? So that's again the, sort of being nudged further, more expansive, not holed up in a state of transcendence with the world like far below, barely visible over there. To be willing to re-enter that. I mean, that's the basis for the Chinese painting, of the monk going up the mountain, finally gets to the top of the mountain, state of transcendence, likes it up there, but finally realizes, no, my completion, coming full circle, is coming back and embracing my humanity, coming back down the mountain and engaging in the village again, not as a special person, but just someone that has recognized their essential nature and also has a deep appreciation for the magnificence of this creation. So that again is coming to full circle. So the point of these different teachings is just to, as pleasant, as profound as some of the points along the way can feel, remain open to the possibility that there's always more to see.